Hello, my name is Paul Nixon and I'm going to be talking to you about finding your military ancestors on Find My Past, and we're looking at First World War records. But before we begin, I want to have a word or two about search, because there are different ways of searching on Find My Past, and it's clear that not everybody knows this, and it's going to be quite helpful, I think, just to run through this in summary. So you can search from the home page. You could type in the name of the individual here. In this case, I've typed in Charles Seberin, and the reason I've typed his name in particular will become clearer later on, but it serves a purpose because his name's an odd name. It's an unusual surname. And so therefore with an unusual surname you'd expect to find fewer results, certainly than if his name was John Smith. And there you go, 16 results. I'm showing some of them here, not all of them. But that was all we had for this Charles Seberin. I'd also typed in his date of birth on here, 1882, give or take a couple of years either side, and it's come up with him as the right man in every single case. And those arrows, those ticks rather, on the camera icon on the right hand side tell me that I've already viewed those images before. So search from homepage is the first way, and that's a very broad search. Now you can also search by category, or for that matter you can search all records here as well. So you'd have the menu at the top of the page. I haven't got it on that particular screenshot. But go to the top of the page, blue bar at the top, click on search, and what drops down are the different categories. So you've got search all records, birth, marriage and death, churches and religion, etc., etc. So a number of categories there. And you can click on military armed forces and conflict, which is what I've highlighted, and there you see the different options. So you've got the first name, last name at the top. The event year is where it says when. You've got underneath the first name, last name, you've got when, year of birth, year of death. So when is when this particular event actually happens. So it might be an enlistment date, might be a promotion date, for instance. If you don't know the when, leave it blank. I would generally advise putting less in rather than more on all these searches on Find My Past. But you can browse by record set here as well, so you can see everything that we've got within military armed forces and conflict, which can be quite interesting. Certainly useful in knowing how record sets have been named. So that's the second way. The third way is A to Z record search. And I find this very useful. I use it all the time because I know that I'm only looking at 2 or 3 records, 2 or 3 collections at a time. So I know exactly what I want, and it's normally British Army service records pre-First World War, or British Army service records First War. So in this example, I've clicked on A to Z record sets, and I've just typed in Army in the search box, and this is what comes up. And it goes on. I've just shown you the top half of that search page. Right, enough about search. So there's remember three different ways of searching, and more is less. Right, Royal Navy. Let's look at the Royal Navy first. They're the senior service. Got a lot of Navy records on Find My Past, and arguably the best collection of Navy records anywhere online. I've highlighted here the 2 key sets really, which are Royal Navy Seamen, 1899 to 1919, and Royal Navy Officers, the same period. Now the reason we've done that is to try and catch those people who would have joined up and served during the First World War. So these dates are, of course, the dates the men joined the Navy, not the dates they were born. The dates they joined the Navy. There will be men who, of course, joined earlier than 1899, but we'll have the majority here. We've also got beneath these 2 records that I've highlighted, Officers Medal Roll for 1914 to 1920, and the Royal Navy 1914 Star Medal Roll, and also I've called it Sailors Died in the Great War, which is the equivalent of Soldiers Died in the Great War. We list it on the site as WWI Naval Casualties, but it's effectively a Soldiers Died in the Great War, albeit not with as much information as you'd find on Soldiers Died. So the service records, as we'll find out, the service records for the Navy and the Air Force Probably the least detailed of all. The Army records are the most detailed, but ironically, whereas the majority of naval and RAF records survive, the majority of British Army service records for the period did not survive because they were destroyed in bombing in the Second World War. So that's the shame of it. But anyway, let's look at Royal Navy service records, 1899 to 1920. John Travers Cornwall, a well-known sailor of the First World War, won the VC at the Battle of Jutland, died of wounds received in action on 31st of May 1916. It says at the bottom of this particular extract from his service record, he served aboard HMS Chester, and funnily enough, I was in Chester Cathedral yesterday and saw Cornwall mentioned, saw an image of Chester at Jutland and the names of men killed on that ship, and so it's ironic or relevant, I suppose, that I should be talking about Cornwall today, but coincidental, of course, as well. So it gives you the basics: his age, his place of birth. He was a brewer's boy before he joined up. He had a scar at his knee, another scar at his knee, a scar on his shoulder blade, and a scar on his elbow. So he'd had a rough and tumble before he joined the Navy. But anyway, all the information is there about him, and you could then use that information to research a bit more. So Vivid was a shore establishment, Chester was the ship, and it gives you his rating. So he was a boy second class, then a boy first class. It gives you the dates that he was on those particular establishments. His character is assessed as very good. His ability is assessed as satisfactory. So useful information, but it's basic information really. Cornwall's number, which I missed off, is J42563, and if you go to National Archives site, they've got a very useful breakdown of number prefixes, so you can see that J is Seaman and Communications Rating, M is Engine Room Artificers, etc. Not on this list are letters beginning with are numbers beginning with the letter F, which indicates service with the Royal Naval Air Service or the Fleet Air Arm. That's where the F comes from, the Fleet Air Arm. Royal Marines, we've got service records 1899 to 1919, 137,000 records which are housed in ADM 159 at National Archives. Do note though that there are 15,000 records for enlisted men missing. Not records we've missed, records that are just missing. Similar in look and feel to the Navy records. So here you've got Frank Moore Blakeman, with all the information about him, where he enlisted. He enlisted at York on the 8th of March 1916. He was 27 years old when he enlisted and born 8th of January 1889. He was born in Yorkshire and worked as a miner. So you get lots of good useful information there. And then you get the information about his service below that. Here we have marriage registers as well for the Royal Marines, 1813 to 1920. There are 18,000 records here from the National Archives in those two series, 183 and 184. ADM is Admiralty, by the way. Marriages, births and baptisms, and again we've got Blakeman here. He was married before he joined the Royal Marines, but you have details of his wife here, and you also have information on his children and their dates of birth. So again, useful information to have. We have the medal rolls for the Marines 1914 to 1920. There's 76,000. Staggering, really. It still staggers me when you look at the numbers involved in the First World War. This is just one regiment, one arm. There's 76,000 records from ADM 171. Name, rank, rating, medals awarded, and how these medals were disposed of. So here you have the names on the left-hand side, then the rank or rating. The medals earned is the fourth column, and so the ST is star, V is victory medal, B is British War Medal, and then further down 1914 ST is 1914 star, of course. How issued or disposed of is in column 5. S is self, so it was sent to the man, given to the man. WW, which we can see there against Francis Nelson's name, Major Francis Nelson, is widow, so he was killed or died of wounds, and the medals were given to his widow. Tamar and HMS Plymouth are where the men were serving, so the medals were sent there. So again, snippets of information to help build that picture. Royal Naval Division. So we've got a good collection of R&D records, 10,000 records of men who died. Again, 10,000. The numbers are staggering for the First World War. 10,000 men died. Transcription only. Royal Naval Division service records, 1914 to 1919. 50,000 records there, officers and ratings. Service records from National Archives in ADM 339. This chap is Alan McCartney Castle. Some of you might have listened to an earlier webinar I've done where I've mentioned him before. I met him when I was a teenager and he was in his late 80s. He lived in Chelmsford where I live, and I went round to see him to talk to him about what it was like being a soldier in the First World War, and he told me all about it. And he had worked as a tailor before the First World War, joined up in 1915, served on Gallipoli, got through that unscathed, and then ended up in the debacle at Beaumont Hamel on the Somme in November 1916, where he was wounded and had his right leg amputated quite high on the thigh. And the record shows there that the first entry says dangerously ill in 5th General Hospital, Rouen. Then again, next of kin informed. Then the next line, dangerously ill, not doing well. And again, dangerously ill, not doing well. Dangerously ill, not doing well. There's 3 entries there. Next one, progress report, dangerously ill in 5th General Hospital, Rouen. This is January 17, so he was wounded in November 16. So he's been in there for a while. But then he's off the dangerous list, next of kin informed. And then he's transferred to the Lord Derby War Hospital at Warrington. So the detail is very very thorough. There's about 3 pages for him, and thankfully he did make a full recovery, and he was fitted with an artificial limb at Roehampton and went back to his job working in the tailor's shop in London. But he didn't last long because he was dismissed by the shop because he wasn't able to walk quickly enough to the door to escort customers out of the shop. So that was the land fit for heroes, and that's Alan McCartney Castle. Merchant Navy. Merchant Navy records, they're not military, of course, it's employment. You put it in employment category elsewhere, but of course the Merchant Navy played a vital role. The majority of service records for the period 1913 to 1921 were destroyed by the Board of Trade, so they don't exist. So one way or the other, Board of Trade, MOD, Luftwaffe, we're not doing too well. There you go. Service records on Find My Past cover the period 1835 to 1857 and 1918 to 1941. We do have Merchant Navy medal cards from 1914 to 1925, but these are indexes only that link to images on the National Archives site. So here's a typical card. You've got Alexander Nixon, born in Arran, by the looks of things, 1886, and then it gives you details of the ships he served on. This man is no relation. Army, British Army service records, 1760 to 1913. I mention this because you will find First World War men who have records in this series, including my great grandmother's brother, who we'll come to later on. British Army service records, 1914 to 1920. 4.2 million records here. So we have soldiers' service records from W363, the burnt documents, and soldiers' pension records from W364, which are not burnt. Now they've been available online for a number of years, But the version that we've published is far more comprehensively indexed and includes index of lists of men never seen before. So there are 4.2 million index names in total. Don't be misled by the dates, 1914 to 1920. This series includes records going back to the 1870s and forwards to the 1930s and 40s. In fact, I've found correspondence in these files from the 1990s. So this man in the middle here is Charles Sabaran, who I mentioned right at the start of this webinar. He served in the East Surrey Regiment, 1st East Surrey Regiment at Mons. He joined up in 1900 and served in the Boer War. And here he is sitting in a wheelchair in a place called Chailey in Sussex in 1915. The men around him are also wounded or sick, convalescing patients. And I think these men were the first intake into Hickwell's convalescent home in Chailey. There's how many? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 men there. 12 men was the first intake. So there are 8 of the 12 there. I'm pretty sure that's them. You've got 2 nurses behind. On the right-hand side, as we look at it, is Frances Isabel Blenko, and on the left is her niece. Charles Sabaran again just shows you the extent of his wound. So if Alan McCartney Castle's right leg had been amputated quite high up, his is even higher up. There's nothing left at all. Various shots of Charles Sabaran. Now he's interesting, as I say, because well, he was wounded on the first day of fighting, for a start, 23rd of August 1914, and he has service records existing in 364 and 363. So remember, 364 is the unburnt series. And now when a soldier attested with the British Army, this attestation paper was filled in twice. And the second time it was completed, the word duplicate was written on the paper. And that's what we have here. We can see duplicate is written at the top. And that D, that spelling of duplicate, is the same handwriting that is written in Charles Sabaran's name. So it was done at the time. So this is the unburnt series. And that's the burnt series. So you can see the difference. Now for some men, that's all that exists. It's fragments like this, and for others, of course, nothing at all. It's completely burnt. But where possible, those fragments have been saved and they've been filmed, and that's the result. But it is different. It's very much of course it's different. You can see it's different. Charles Sabaran has signed his name Charles Sabaran on this burnt document, but on the unburnt one, he's just signed it as C. Sabaran. And you will find different documents in each of these series. So although the attestation paper is broadly the same and the information should be identical, you will find papers in one that do not exist in another. So here's a list of men that I referred to earlier on. We decided to index these names. I've just highlighted a few names here. Nixon again no relation, but what it says here, it gives you details that the men were killed in action on the 17th of November 1914, and that this was reported by the officer commanding the battalion 2 days later. So not, earth-shattering information for that matter, but some of these lists are very useful. In fact, I found a name the other day of a man whose medals I have, and it told me when he was wounded and the battalion he was with at the time, which I didn't know before. That's the only bit of information that survives for him, but it was crucial information. We have here, you can see where this record appears. So we've got this man, Nixon, appearing on the record of Percy Hassell. Where it says originating record, that's what that means. So this is one of the lists that we've indexed, and rather, that we've captured and indexed. And you'll see that on this particular example, I've just highlighted 4 names. Nixon again no relation, and it says killed in action 17/11/14, reported by OC Battalion 2 days later. So not vital information, but still, again, useful information if you didn't have that already. These pages appear randomly inserted in soldiers' records throughout 363 and 364, and we've decided to index them and attribute them in this way. So in this particular case, we can see that the man's record appears within the record for Percy Hassel of the Royal Horse and Field Artillery. That's the originating record. So where you see originating record, that means that's where that record appears. And if you wanted to, you could then go and call up the record for Percy Hassel. So you go to Army Service Records 14 to 20 and type in 1169, 11169 and his name, and come to his record. Now the reason for doing that, for pointing people back to that record, is that there might be papers before this one that give some context. Often there aren't, often they are just single papers and pages that are inserted, but sometimes there is context there, which can be useful. So if you wanted to check that out, that's the way to do it. Wildcard searching. Use wildcards. Always use wildcards. So in this example, we're looking for a man who served in the Essex Regiment. If you type in Essex in the regiment field, you'll get nothing. If you type Essex and asterisk, you'll get Essex Regiment and Essex Yeomanry. If you just typed Essex Reg, you just get Essex Regiment. And if you just type Essex Yo, you'll get Essex Yeomanry. Now you can use as many or as few wildcards as you like. But I advise to just use them liberally. If in doubt, use a wild card. So for Charles Sabaran, I know he's got a record there, and I know he served in the East Surrey Regiment. It says regiment at the side. I'm just going to type in East Surrey. What do I get? That irritating screen. No results. And the reason it's got no results is it's looking for exactly East Surrey, whereas in fact the regiment will be recorded as East Surrey Regiment. So in this example, I've given an extreme example. Charles Sabaran, I've just typed CH asterisk and Sabaran's SAB asterisk. For the regiment, simply SUR with an asterisk at either end. And that's going to give me the results I want. Charles Sabaran, East Surrey Regiment. So do use those wildcards. Ignore them at your peril. British Army 1760s to 1913. Royal Hospital, Chelsea, Soldiers Service Records 1760 to 1913, very useful. Militia Service Records, completely not useful at all for this case, neither will that be. Imperial Yeomanry will be. I'm going to repeat this document again actually. Edit please. British Army 1760 to 1913, so these are the records that are pre-First World War. Royal Hospital Chelsea, Soldiers Service Records 1760 to 1913, and Militia Service Records 1806 to 1915. There are going to be First World War men within both those two series. Royal Hospital Chelsea Pensioners Discharge Documents, again there will be people there. There won't be in this because it's too early. Imperial Yeomanry, yes there will be Imperial Yeomen who served in the First World War. And there could be soldiers awarded deferred pensions who appear there. There won't be men in Kilmainham because the records are far too early. So of those 7 separate series in the British Army collection for 1760 to 1913, there are potentially 5 series which could contain records for men who would subsequently fight in the First World War. So Soldiers Service Records 1760 to 1913, just over 1 million records, and it's other ranks only, doesn't include men who died or were discharged early, and what you get are generally 4-page attestation papers, but you may also get discharge documents, correspondence, etc. You get summary of service, next of kin. That's what it looks like. It does for this man anyway, because he had a very colourful career, so all those entries there are misdemeanors. It's where he was. Well, some is transfer, some are in confinement awaiting trial, and then the sentence that was passed. So lots of information there. You'll see these same service papers in 363 and 364, but these are the earlier ones, and they're better condition. They weren't burnt, they weren't damaged by firemen's hoses. And you see the original colour of the paper, of the ink, the stamps, signatures. It's lovely. And look how neat it is as well. Militia Service Records, 1806 to 1915, 580,000 records. Again, other ranks only, not officers. And again, men included in this series may also have papers in 363 and 4, and in W97 for that matter. Typically, again, 4-page attestation papers give summary of service, next of kin, physical characteristics, etc. And there you see the militia attestation. Similar, as I say, to the other attestation papers. Quite detailed. You get the detail of the man, his name, where he was born, where he's living, where he's working, his age, all sorts of useful information actually. So records in W96, W97 and W364 for this man, who is my great-grandmother's brother. And his name was Bertrand Elam, although he joined the Elam, E-L-A-M, although he joined the army as Herbert Richard Hellam, for reasons best known to himself. And he has records in W96 militia, and then in W97 when he joined the Wiltshire Regiment and bought himself out shortly afterwards, and then W364 where you see him joining the 20th Hussars and then serving through the Boer War. That was 1897 he joined the Hussars, serving through the Boer War, discharged, must be 1897, 1909 presumably, joining up again in the First World War, serving with the Rifle Brigade, then the Gloucestershire Regiment, which is when this photo was taken, and then latterly the Royal Defence Corps. And you can see in the photo that he's wearing the Queen South Africa Medal and the 1914-15 style ribbon. But he has about 50 pages in 364, and a typical soldier really. He was salt of the earth, probably hard as nails, and had a love-hate relationship with the army. And of course when the hate relationship turned to hate, the army was very quick to jump on the men and to record it on their papers. And so we see he was using insubordinate language to a superior officer. He, at Colchester on 18th of July 1895, after having been ordered to stables, said to Squadron Sergeant Major J. Waldron, 20th Hussars, "Bleep, stables, I'm finished soldiering," or words to that effect. And it's the words to that effect which is so nice, I think. So, back to the attestation papers. Just a little point to notice here. I've sort of tried to figure this out for myself, so I'm rather proud of myself that I've done so. So at the top here, left-hand corner, HWV, that's the printer. So Hazel, Watson and Viney printed this particular form in a run of 50,000. This is when it was done, January 1901. And it's Army Form B111 version 2. Now I have no idea what that 85847 is underneath. That will refer to something. I don't know what it is, so if anybody knows, please let me know. You can contact me, pnixon@findmypast.com. British Army officers, what about them? Well, the records do survive. They're in W339 and 374 at the National Archives. They've not been digitised, but they can be searched online on the National Archives site. Officers' careers can also be traced through army lists, which can be bought cheaply online. So Air Force is the junior service. Royal Air Force service records for airmen and service records for officers we have. The service records for airmen you won't find anywhere else. We are the only site that has these. Service records for officers you'll find on National Archives site as well. We've also got Women's Royal Air Force and RAF Muster Roll for April 1918. So there's a lot there. There's a comprehensive collection of RAF. The Air Force Airman Service records to 1939, don't be misled by that. There are records that date as late as 1939, but for the most part it's First World War, some interwar men and a handful of men who served in the Second World War, but the bulk of Second World War records are not there. So you will not find, in all probability, your ancestor, if you're looking for your Spitfire pilot ancestor, you won't find him there. Full colour service records only on Find My Past, as I say, for the RAF airmen. You've got Edgar Albert Nixon, again an ancestor of mine, my grandfather's older brother, the oldest of 5 boys. Gives you where he was born. Born in London, joined the RFC on the 29th of June 1916, and then transferred to the RAF when it was formed on the 1st of April 1918. He was a rigger. He worked at a number of different, or was stationed at a number of different squadrons, which are all listed there. So you can see the unit he served with, where he was transferred to, etc. So 13th Training Squadron to 215th Squadron, so on and so forth. And all those squadrons can be researched online. So other key World War I record sets. Medal index cards. We have transcription only. You can search by name, regiment, rank and number, and that links to TNA website. Images. Silver War Badge Roll, again, transcription only. Date of enlistment, discharge, cause of discharge, whether or not served overseas, the age of the man sometimes, the badge number, and the regiment or unit discharged from. So if you pick up one of these Silver War badges in the market or on well-known internet auction sites, they will all have a number on the back, and you can use that number on Find My Past to find out who the man was. So if it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, type that in and get the badge number, find out who the man was. And you never used to be able to do this. You'd have to go to National Archives and then check through the rolls, but now it's just so much easier because you can do it all online. And who knows, that Silver War badge could be to somebody who was awarded a gallantry medal or took part in an action where a VC was awarded or was wounded on the 1st of July 1916. So you never really know when you buy these things what the history is behind them, and can strike it lucky. I mean, that opens enormous paths to research men, because the Silver War Badge roll is so comprehensive. It gives you details of the man, when he enlisted, all those things there, why he was discharged, when discharged, etc. You can really start quite a solid biography of a man just from this particular role, which I think is the best role of all the roles that exist for First World War awards. These are new from Find My Past, newish. De Rouvigny's Roll of Honour, 1914 to 1920. We've got brand new scans of that, 3 of the volumes. Anyway, there are 5 volumes, and we've got scans of 3 of them. Bond of Sacrifice is a new collection from us, that gives officer biographies. And what I've done here is highlight biography for the same man, Robert Henry Chester Abercrombie. He's got a biography on de Rouvigny's, which was submitted by next of kin, and also on this Bond of Sacrifice as well. And the biographies are different, so it's definitely worth checking. Of course, the photo is different as well. You just get head and shoulders on the second one. You get more of his chest, the bust on the de Rouvigny's. Records of service, enlistments, nominal rolls. We've got HAC, the oldest regiment in the British Army, and the Tank Corps, and also Royal Artillery. 1919 to 1939. Again, they're mostly men who enlisted after the First World War and up until 1939, but you have men going beyond that to 1942. You also have evidence of men who enlisted in the RA between or from 1883. So there's quite a wide range. When we licensed from Royal Artillery, we were talking about interwar records, but there are men who joined up for whatever reason during that interwar period who had seen prior service, and where they had seen prior service, we've indexed their original regimental number, so you can search on that. So again, worth checking this particular source. So in total, over 17 million records on Find My Past covering the First World War. It's a very comprehensive look at what we have, and we're not done yet, for that matter. There'll be more coming, including these guys, prisoners of war. We've just released the first tranche of records, nearly 50,000 records, including men captured at Gallipoli, men imprisoned elsewhere during the latter stages of the war. There will be more First World War records to come. We're not done with this, and we'll have records from other times as well. So it's 1715 to 1945. So Second World War prisoners of war will be in there. There'll be men from conflicts, men and women and children, internees for that matter, covering that wide range. So this is something that we've licensed from National Archives. Very, very proud of this collection, and look forward to seeing more of the records online. Other sources, regimental museums, foot guards. So they have attestation papers for the First World War. They've got enrolment books, nominal rolls. Definitely worth investigating. Majority of the files are stuffed full of information. They've not been weeded, unlike the files that you'll find in WO97. Those records from 1760 to 1913. Those records have been weeded over time by the MOD. Most of these guards records don't appear to have been weeded, so you'll find all sorts of information there. And there's evidence that these enrolment books survive in some regiments as well, which again can be very useful. This particular example isn't filled in thoroughly. You can see large swathes of white there, but some of them are. Some you'll get next of kin, place of birth, date of enlistment, etc. British Library, the India Office collection in El Mill, records 1708 to 1959. If your ancestor served in the Indian Army, he might have surviving papers in this series. So the records on the right are for, or the medals rather, medals I bought for this man, George A.J. Welch, no relation, but I just like the group. I quite like the fact that his QSA ribbon was so tatty. So yeah, he's got Boer War medals, First World War medals, Delhi Durbar, 1911, and then a long service good conduct medal. Quite a career, and in fact, when I found the papers in the British Library, I realised that his father was already in the regiment. He joined the regiment from the age of 14, and I think he died in the regiment. He was in the regiment for many years, and he was a soldier through and through. World Wide Web. Highland Light Infantry Chronicle is available on the FIBIS site, Families in British India Society's site. You can browse through that. It's a great source, free source. There are other regimental magazines out there as well. eBay, don't discount eBay. If you're looking for a particular individual, you'll find named items for sale, postcards, medals, and so on. And then medal archives like Dix, Noonan Webb, Spink, Dixon's medals. Search for ancestors on those sites. Spink and Dix, Noonan Webb have archives that you can search, listing previous catalogues. The Long Trail website and the Great War Forum are probably the best online resources for First World War. Long Trail is a website, it's an information resource. The Great War Forum is just that. It's a forum which has experts who will be happy to give you the benefit of their wisdom. And this little site, which is my own blog, has a lot of information about Army service numbers between those dates. So the idea being that if you know your man's regimental number, you can find out when he enlisted just from that number. So, and this site explains a bit more. So you Google it, Army Service Numbers 1881 to 1918. Finally, if you still can't find your Army ancestor's service record, try some DIY. If you know his regiment and number, look for men with the same regiment and similar numbers on Find My Past. Use the wildcard option. So in this example, I was trying to find when this man, Alexander Gilbert Clark, joined the DLI and when he arrived in France. So I looked for other records with similar numbers and found that 78512 and 78501 all arrived in France on the 21st of November 1917, and they were posted to the 12th Battalion Durham Light Infantry. So the likelihood is that this man also joined at the same time. Sorry, let's skip that last bit, can we? Just go back a little bit. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation.